Hey guys, Chill here. Welcome back to Patrio. So here's where we left off. We got our Vuex all working good with the mutations. We understand more or less how to get reactivity working, how to get our time travel debugging working. Now let's start to add in some actual useful operations that we're going to need. Specifically, we're going to be adding in the ability to add new areas and to add items to those areas. So that'll give us some opportunity to look into more interesting, interactions, and also to add in some nice user interface stuff. So what I want to happen here is I want there to be like a button, little plus sign. You click it, it opens up a dialog. You can input the name of an area, and then it'll add that area to the list. Seems simple enough. And Vuetify has very nice dialog component here. It's gonna be a lifesaver. So how do we add a dialog? Well, I mean, first off, let's get rid of some dumb test code that we're not using anymore. So we'll get rid of this foo bar here, and let's get rid of this button, and let's go into areas, and let's get rid of we'll get rid of this action. We're going to need another action to add instances, but it'll probably be different than this. So for the time being, we'll just get rid of that. We'll get rid of the corresponding mutation, and I believe that should be good. Let's just take a look here. We'll reset, I believe. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I would like a little bit of space between these two things, but it seems to be working. Yeah, okay. So, all right, so let's create a little div here that is going to contain the button for opening our dialog. We'll give a little space in between these two panels with a little bit of margin in here. So the dialog, you put that in with the v dialog component. Simple enough. Now in here you put v model, and this is going to connect to the variable that controls the state of whether the dialog is being displayed or not. So let's just create, just quickly here, create a little variable, call it dialog. I'll set that initially, we'll just set that equal to false. All right. And here we'll go dialog. So this is now bound to the dialog. When the dialog is opened, this will become true. If you set it to false, the dialog is closed, and vice versa. We'll do width of the dialog is equal to 500. I don't know, that seems like a good amount. Okay, so what do we put in here? Well, first off, we need we put in a slot, and that's where we put the activator, which is going to be a button. So the button that controls the dialog is inside of the dialog component here. So it's an interesting setup. It's kind of neat. I like it. So template, v slot activator. So I'm not exactly sure like what all this is. This is a syntax for slots in Vue. I don't exactly know why this is the way it is. What I did, and I mean, I sometimes do this, is, I just look on the example here and it says, let me see here, usage contains 2 slots. So v activator, yeah, it looks like this, and then we got a button, and the on event calls this function, which is bound in from the slot, and attrs is v bind. I guess the attributes, I don't know, I don't get it. I don't understand what this actually does. And you know what, it's fine because it works. So what are we doing here? V button, so here's the actual button that's going to control this stuff, and let's give it a color. Give a nice pink color. So v bind, and we bind attributes. And v on, we could just do on. No, wait. V on. That goes to on. And we want this to be... what is this? Floating something or other? Something button. I forget what this means, but this changes the appearance of the button a little bit. Makes it a floating button. And we want this button to have an icon, so we'll do v icon inside the button here. Color will be white, so white text on a pink background. And we'll make the button, the icon size extra large in there. And what we want here is a material design plus icon. All right. So this is what we need for the activator for this model. Now, we need the actual content of the model when it's opened up. So we put a v card in here. That gives us our content. And, okay, well, let's do v card title. And the title is going to be new storage area. Class here. Give it a headline class. That'll make the text nice and bold and stuff. Big and bold and beautiful. V card text. So here is the content of the V card. And we're going to put a text field in here. So V text field. And that is going to bind to something. But we don't have the thing it is going to bind to yet. You know what? We'll just leave it for now. We'll put that in later. Let's just get a little skeleton going here. And at the bottom of the card, we want some actions. So V card actions. And V spacer. I've seen this in the examples, and what this seems to do is it puts our buttons on the right-hand side, which is very nice. For a dialog, you want your buttons, you know, right aligned, and this does that for you. And let's just put a couple V buttons in here. So we got a couple of buttons, and the actions for both of these, we're just going to set dialog equal to false to start off with. So clicking either of these buttons will just close the dialog. Hopefully. If everything is working correctly, that is what should happen. And in here, we'll just put some random text. Okay, so if everything's working correctly, I should get a button, click it, dialog opens. Click one of these buttons, dialog closes. So here's the button. Okay, so the dialog does not seem to be a dialog. Let me just, no, so there's something broken here. Yeah, something's broken. All right, fair enough. All this stuff is supposed to be inside of the dialog, obviously. I just put it outside, so that's why it was chilling out there. So let's put that in here. And yeah, this seems like it's probably going to be a better deal for us. Yeah, here we go. Click that. We get our dialog. Yeah, just some text here. Click this. Closes. Okay. So we've got our dialog. Now I want to flesh this out a little bit. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little object in here that is going to store the state of the dialog and variables that have to do with the dialog. And I'm just going to call it, yeah, add area dialog. So here's the thing. I want to set it up with some default values. But when I reset the dialog, I have to also put those default values in there. So I'm going to have a reset function, and I'm going to have a thing that initializes. I don't want to duplicate the defaults in here and here. So I'll create an object, make a read only. This is a TypeScript thing. Add area dialog defaults. And this is going to be, you know, just a standard JavaScript object. So what are we going to have? We're going to have the flag is active. That is initially going to be false. And what else do we have here? We have, okay, so the dialog is going to have an input, and it's going to bind to a variable. And so we have to give a thing to bind to. So this will be the name of the area. And it should initially just be empty. So there's our defaults. Now add area dialog. So we have to set our default into here. Now here's the thing. If we just do this, we just do this dot add area dialog defaults. This seems like, yeah, this is what we want to do. But then this will just be referencing this read-only thing. We want to copy this information into a new object here. So here's where a little bit of JavaScript Fu Manchu comes into play here. Object dot assign. So this is some craziness in JavaScript, but we have a empty object, and we're going to take all the properties from this object, jam it into here. So object dot assign this dot add area dialog defaults. So we create a new object based on this object, and then this is going to reference that new object. And trust me, this is going to make things a lot better. So now we have our data that our dialog is going to bind to. Let's create, let me see here. Let's create a function reset add area dialog. This function returns nothing, and it is going to just do this. So this dot add area dialog is equal to object dot assign. There we go. And now we have a single source of truth for the defaults of this add area dialog, which is nice. I always like having that single source of truth. Okay, so now vmodel add area dialog dot is active. This is the thing that we bind for the showing of the dialog. Here v on is equal to on. This should be fine. This should be fine. So if we click the cancel button, then we want to reset add area dialog. We need an input here. So we do vtext field in here, and what is this going to bind to? Well, obviously it's going to be the add area dialog dot name. So that's what we created this for, something for this to bind to. Label is area name, and yeah, that should be fine. And for now, we'll just, yeah, when we click here, we'll also reset add area dialog. Let's test this out quickly. Make sure everything's on the up and up before we proceed. Reset this. Open this up. Yeah, so now we have our input here. And sexy. It's the sexy area. And we do that. And now if we click it again, notice that this has been cleared because of our reset function, which is what I want. Okay, so now we need some behavior for actually adding the area. So here's where things get a little interesting. All right, so in here, let's create a mutation. Mutation, add area. So adding an area will just require, in our case, just the name of the area is all the input that we need. So, name, and that's a string. So what are we going to do in the add area? Well, we're going to be pushing a new area object into this array. But I don't want to have duplicate area names. So first, let's make sure that that name doesn't exist. So if this dot areas dot find a to a dot name is equal to name. So if we find an area whose name is the same as the name that is passed in, which means this is not null, it'll actually return undefined, but you know, whatever. You get the idea. So if we find something that matches, let's So area name already exists, aborting, so I'll just put a little message into our console. And now this dot areas dot push new area. Now we don't have an ID. In the end of the day, this mutation will take the string and the ID will come in from the back end. But we don't have that yet, so we'll just put a random ID in here. And then the name. All right. So, yeah, that should be good for our testing for now. Eventually, yeah, this will take in an ID and a name, and then we'll have an action that contacts the backend, and the backend it'll return both the ID, and then that can be used to do the mutation. So, reset add area dialog. Let's put in here an action, add area. We'll call it add area dialog, execute. I don't think that's how you spell that. Execute. There you go. Okay. So what is add area dialog execute gonna do? Well, it is gonna do this dot add area. It's gonna go area module dot underscore add area. This dot add area dialog dot name. You do that, and this dot reset add area dialog. And that should be good. And then we go to here, and we do add area dialog execute. Okay, so if all is well with the world, we should be able to do this. Click in here, put in a name, add, and it appears in here. And that is indeed what happens. Let's take a look at our console. Nothing is yelling at us. All right, let's try adding one that already exists. We do it. Area named butts already exists, aborting add area. So there we go. We get this big error, which is, I mean, we're not going to want this for the end product, you know? The end product will probably not want to do that. So, but what are you going to do, right? I guess we could do something in here. So we could try this. Catch E for exception or error, and then console dot, let me think here, error E. There we go. We'll just print that out to the console, and then we'll reset the dialog. Maybe that's a little better. It's a little closer to what I want to happen, because I don't want the page to die every time I do something like that. That'll probably be closer to what I want to actually happen, because I don't want the page to die every time I do something like that. So, try again. Add that. Try one more time. Gotta click here. I'll fix that. It's annoying to have to click this every time. Add. So it doesn't die, but in here, get a little message. Area named butts already exists. Aborting add area. Okay. So, things are looking good. Annoying thing number one, I don't like to have to click this, so let's do autofocus. If I do autofocus, let me just reload to make sure. Now it'll automatically be in here. I can just type. Now I want to do the same-ish thing, but now inside each of these panels, each of these sections, I want to put a plus sign, and when I click that, I get a different dialog that allows me to add an item to this area. So each area will have its own button. So, I mean, there's different approaches we could take. If we do this, we take this code basically and stick it, not this code, that's the, that's the item list. We take this code and we stick it into this inner loop here. It's going to generate one dialog per area. Yeah, that's correct. I don't want that. I just want a single dialog. All the areas will do it. So I want just a button in here. I want the dialog outside. Now, if we do that, we have to shake things up a little bit. Because in this situation here, the activator button is embedded inside of the HTML for the dialog. But we want to put the button outside of the HTML. That's a little bit of a different story, but that's not that bad. So let's just copy this. Where does this begin and end? Here. So vcard text, vcard template. We'll put this inside of the vcard text after the expansion panels. So this dialog is just on its own, chilling out here. What is it going to have? I think it's going to have basically the same things, maybe. But, so how are we going to do this? When we click a button, we have to communicate, because there's only one dialog, but there are multiple areas. We have to connect which area we're working on, because we want to add an item to a specific area. So, let me think here. We're going to add another data structure for our second dialog here. It's going to look something like this. It's going to have, again, the isActive, the name, but it's also going to store the area to which we are going to be adding this item. So that'll be bound when we click the button. Now I guess we have to import this, it's saying. Alt-Enter. Let's do it. Add import statement. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I want to set it initially to null, but I want to tell TypeScript that the type of it is area. So we cast null to the type area or null, and then we assign it. It's fine. It's funky, but it means that I don't have to define an interface out here. I can type less code, which is always good. So we have this, and then we're just gonna, do the thing that we always do. Add item dialog is equal to add item dialog defaults to the assign thing. Okay, and we want some functions down here. So we're going to reset add item dialog and add item dialog execute. It's going to call a mutation, add item to area. Now we need a special function that we didn't have before. Activate add item dialog. So before, to activate, we just bound this vModel to the isActive variable. But here we have to do something a little extra. So activate item dialog is going to take in the area to which this dialog is going to be working on. Set that to void. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this dot add item dialog dot area is equal to area. Yes. And this dot add item dialog dot isActive is equal to true. So that's what this function will be doing. All right, add item dialog execute. Yes, okay. So we'll just comment that out for a second. We'll get our skeleton working first, and then we'll code up the logic in the storage. Okay, so vDialog model is equal to add item dialog dot isActive. This is the same. Okay, so here we don't have this activator in here, obviously. This is going to go, the equivalent of that is going to go, in here. There's going to be a button in here somewhere, probably. All right, so add item to area. It seems pertinent. Now a text field. So yeah, add item dialog name. Here we go. Item name. That seems to be good enough. Down here, we want the same style. So now we have reset. And that's not it. add item dialog. And here we have, okay, so here's the little, no, this is fine. Add item dialog execute. Okay, so far so good. Now, here comes the little different part. So up in here, where do I want the button? So I'm not in this loop. So this is all the instances. At the very end of all of the instances, we would like a button for adding another item, another instance to that area. And I'll put that button right aligned. So we'll do div.text right. And in here we'll do v button. And class is equal to, we'll give it a little bit of margin. Click. So we want to prevent the default behavior of this button, I believe. That's what it says in the documentation. And I'm going to believe the documentation. So in here, what is going to be? We probably want like an icon in here. Let me just copy and paste icon that I have. That is going to be white icon plus. So now it won't be extra large like the last one. We'll just make this one large. And we're going to make this button floating small. So smaller icon, also smaller button, SAML. And so what do we want to do when we click this button? Here is the $1 million question. Well, obviously, we created a function activate dialog. We're probably going to want to do that when we click this button. Now, activate dialog takes in an area. So here is where we use the area from this loop. And now, when this loop loops, it'll create a button for every iteration, and each button will pass in a different area. And that is how we connect all the dots. So, let's just see if it compiles. It does compile. My other window is telling me it compiles quite nicely. Let us reset. Let's open up. I don't like that. Let's go. Where is it? Where's my button? Here it is. Class v button. Maybe color is equal to pink. Give me that pink. Yeah, that's looking better. We click this, add item to area. Okay, so that's looking better. We can improve this a little bit. Let's make it a little more, customized. So what we'll say, add item to, and we'll actually put the area name in here. Now, area can possibly be null, right? Yeah. So that'll cause a problem. So what we do is we'll do add item dialog dot area. If that is null, then don't put anything out here. Just random. We'll put question marks. Yeah. It should never be able to see that logically, but you know, you have to cover your bases. But if it's not null, then we just put in here add item dialog dot area dot name. So we do this. Now if I try to, let me just add an area, butts. And then we open that up and we add an item to the area, add item to butts. There you go. Cool. So now, what's the next step? I guess we're probably going to want to implement this logic here. So how do we want to handle this? Well, so I'm going to type in a text name of an item. If that item already exists in our list of items, then I want to create an instance that references that existing item. But if the item doesn't exist, I want to push a new item into the item list and then reference that into the area. So we got a little bit of logic that we want to do. Let's go into areas.ts. We'll create a mutation. The mutation will be add item to area. So now we need 2 parameters so things get spicy. We have a payload object, and we have item name, which is a string, and we have area. We have target area, which is an area. Okay. So if item name is in there already, no, if it's empty, that's no good. Empty item name given aborting this. Okay. So here's what I'm going to forget every time. It's got to be payload.item name, right? Okay. Now, we want to look for, in items, we want to look to see if this item already exists. And if so, we want to use the pre-existing item. So let's do const item is equal to this dot items dot find I map to I dot name is identical to payload dot item name. So this will either return reference to the item or it'll return undefined. Oh, so now what do we do? Well, if item is, weakly equal to null, meaning, also including undefined, then we want to do item is equal to new item, and the ID will be 42069, and the name will be payload. I remembered to put the payload, but then I spelled it payload, which is, I'm not against it. What I'm trying to say. This cannot be const, obviously, if we're going to be reassigning it. And then we do this dot. So we have to create the item. We also have to go. Let me think here. Should I invoke another mutation to add item? That's a good question. Should I invoke a mutation from within another mutation, or should I just, we'll just do it directly for now. This dot items dot push item. Okay. Create the item, push it into the list of items, and then use that item to create a new item instance. ID is going to be we're running out of meme numbers here. We need more meme numbers. Quantity, we'll just do a 1 for now. Area is going to be the payload.target area. And the item is going to be the item that we have either found or created. And there you go. Here is our logic for adding an item to an area. Now, this module, add item to area, it needs a payload. 2 things in the payload. One is the item name, which maps to this dot add item dialog dot name. And we need the target area, which maps to this dot add item dialog dot area. Why are you angry at me now? Because area, it is possible for it to be null, right? Here. But when this is executed, that dialog will have been opened and the thing will have been passed in. So we can be sure, famous last words, right? But we can be sure that this is not going to be null. So we can just put this little assertion in here. That's good. That's damn good. So, now, final test. Can we hack it? Butts. Add 2 butts. We will add pubes, and we see pubes. And in our list of items, we now see pubes, and we see that butts has 1 pubes. It's all linked up. This is the beauty. This is the beauty of having this reactive system. We're now just starting to see it pay dividends, and it only pays more and more dividends as your application grows in complexity. But, yeah, and I mean, if I were to add, let me think here, if I were to add also pubes to here, we see, yeah, now pubes exists here, and it also exists here. It's a lovely, lovely little thing. So let's, we're going to commit this because it is good. And since I'm feeling spicy, I'm going to hit you with one more operation here. So if we look in here, we see this one exists in quad dolo. Now, it says 8. Cool. What if I change this? Not changing here. We haven't linked this into our model. So how do we link this into our model? Well, let's create, first of all, let us create a mutation, as you do. Maybe we'll put it here, set item name, that seems like a good place. Mutation, set instance quantity. Yes. So the payload is going to have, of course, the quantity, which is a number, and the instance, which is an item instance. Okay. And it couldn't be simpler. We do instance dot, no, forgot it again. Payload dot instance dot quantity is equal to payload dot quantity. Okay. Love that. I love that auto completion, man. It's so slick. That alone makes it worth the price of admission to TypeScript. TypeScriptistan. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it. Okay, so we've got our mutation in there. Now, here's where things get interesting. So normally, what you would do is when you're wiring up a text field to a variable, you would just do vmodel, and you would bind it directly to a variable. But remember, we cannot directly mutate the state. So vmodel is not a good way to go. There's a trick that you can get vmodel working, but we don't want that. So the state is bound into here. The state sets this text field via this binding. Now we want the ability for the text field to set the state. So we're going to do that via an event. So event, we could do change. The change event happens after you click away from the input, but I want it to be more real time. So we're going to do the input event, which is whenever you type anything, this event will fire. And this event has a parameter. You can get the parameter of the event by star event. And that's just basically the value of the text field. So when this event fires, what we want to do, and this is getting a little long, so I'm going to, let me see here. I'm going to break this line, and I'm going to break this, and I'm going to break this. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So, well, I'm going to break this too. I'm going to break everything. Okay. So when the event happens, we want to do, what is it called? Area module dot underscore set instance quantity. And the quantity is going to be parse int event. And now what instance do we want to set that on? Well, obviously it's this instance here, the one in the loop. So inst. Why are you angry at me? Invalid number of argument. Ah, right. It's the old switcheroo. We got to put a payload object. We can't pass it in directly, unfortunately. I could make it so that we could pass things in directly. I'd have to create boilerplate wrapper functions around every one of our modules, or every one of our mutations. I don't want to do that, so we're not going to do that. So what is the payload? What is it like? It takes in quantity, which is this, and it takes in instance, which is this. So we have unfortunately exceeded our line length, but I don't want to new line this. That's not in my DNA. So we're going to leave it like this. All right, now this should wire things up. Let's reload just for safety's sake. And let's go butts. And let's go cubes. Beautiful. Here. Pubes and butts. 2. 23. You see it? You see it happening? I seen it. Beautiful. So this all is all reactive. Let's up the ante. Let's freaking take this one to 11. Where's my list of, here it is. No, that's not it. This is no. Here it is. I minimized it. So in my list here, let's add a little more dynamic calculation in here. Where's my boy? So we have 4 instance. So this lists all the instances. And so for items, for instances. So at the end of this, I want to show the total. You know what I'm saying? So let's do v card. You know, put some text inside the card. We're going to put a row inside there. And in that row, it's going to be formatted basically like one of these, except instead of having an instance name and quantity, we're going to put a total, and we are going to put in the total of all the different instances of this item. So we can find out how many of this item we have across all areas, which is probably useful information. And how we do that is we reduce all instances, and we just basically take the sum of all quantities over all instances of a single item. So there you go. And this will be calculated dynamically. And now, so we got butts, total 23. Let's go into here. Let's add more butts. And now you see that, I mean, obviously the name of the item is pubes, not butts. So that was dumb. Let's add pubes. Yeah. And now we look down here. We got butts, we got pubes, and it's 23 plus 1 is 24. Let me see here. It's a long boy is the problem here. But if you see me type in here 34, 57. Yeah, dynamically changes. If I open up butts here and we see the pubes, and I can see, yeah, you can see it here, and you can see no, don't scroll. You're freaking ruining my demonstration here. As I type in here, it's dynamically changing all these things. So that's the beauty. That is the beauty of the reactivity. And we have it all set up with our centralized Vuex state management, which is going to be great when we add multiple pages. Right now, everything's on just a single page, but we'll change that in the future. But yeah, this is some good shit. In the next video, I think you can probably, if you think about it, you can probably guess the direction that we're going to be heading in next video, because we've got all these actions, we've got all these mutations that we're just directly mutating the state. We're not contacting the backend. We're not registering any of these changes. That's obviously not a very good idea. If we close the window, we lose all the information that we entered. So in the next video, we are going to be, well, in our controllers, we're going to be adding in endpoints, API endpoints for all of these different actions. And then in our Vuex, we are going to be adding actions that contact the endpoints. And after the operation has proceeded at the API side, then it will commit the mutation to the Vuex state. So we're going to be replacing all of these mutation commits with action dispatches. Until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like button. Helps a lot. And I will see you with some more Pantrio.